Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to the DLSU IALU LaSalle Sustainability Lecture Series. So, for the month of March, we will have a panel discussion with women leading the charge in sustainability. Before we begin, let us start with an opening prayer.
Let me be the change I want to see, to do with strength and wisdom all that needs to be done, and become the hope that I can be. Set me free from my fears and hesitation. Grant me courage and humility. Fill me with spirit to face the challenge and start the change I long to see. Today I start the change I want to see. Even if I'm not the light, I can be the spark in faith, service, and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in me. Today I start the change I want to see.
Even if I'm not the light,
I can be the spark. Service and communion. Let us start the change we want to see. The change that begins in me.
Jesus in us.
Jesus in us.
Now, to give us an overview of what the LaSalle Sustainability Lecture Series is all about, let's listen to our Vice President for Research and Innovation of De La Salle University, Manila, Professor Raymond Tan.
Good day, everyone. I'm Professor Raymond Tan. I'm the Vice President for Research and Innovation of De La Salle University in Manila, Philippines. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this edition of the 2024 Sustainability Lecture Series. De La Salle University is a member of a network of Lasallian higher education institutions known as IALU. IALU has member institutions in 5 different continents: the Americas, Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and Eastern Asia. De La Salle University is a private, comprehensive Catholic university initially founded as De La Salle College in 1911. We are now 1 year removed from our Golden Jubilee as a university and have seen extensive growth in research productivity over the past 50 years. We are ranked first among Philippine institutions in terms of research output in this decade to date. We are the most heavily funded private institution in the country and have seen a 7-fold increase in research output over the past 10 years. As a result, we are ranked by the Times Higher Education world university rankings of research-intensive institutions, and are also top ranked in the following subject areas: physical sciences, social sciences, engineering, computer science, business and economics, education, and arts and humanities. The Sustainability Lecture Series is inspired by two documents that were published in 2015. Number one, intended for the Catholic world, was Pope Francis's Laudato Si encyclical. Number two were the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, intended for the secular world. But what is interesting to note is that these two documents have a strong intersection in seeking sustainable development for the entire planet. And these provide the basis for the series of lectures that we've held since 2021. The Sustainability Lecture Series is organized by a core group, initially consisting of Professor Dr. Kathleen Aviso, the current Dean of the Gokongwei College of Engineering, Dr. Carmelita Quebenco, the former President and current Chancellor Emeritus of De La Salle University, Professor Dr. Alvin Colaba, the Director of the Center for Engineering and Sustainable Development Research, which is the organizational host of this lecture series. And we were joined last year with the support of Professor Dr. Aristotle Obando, current Assistant Dean for Research, and former PhD student, Dr. Maria Victoria Migos Umagan, and of course, yours truly. Since January 2021, we've dealt with diverse topics in sustainable development, holding lectures online on various topics at the last Wednesday of each month. The lectures have been recorded for the most part and are available in a dedicated YouTube channel. The lectures have been viewed thousands of times by different viewers asynchronously, in addition to the live audience that we normally have. And of course, the resource persons are drawn from the global IALU network, and we've had speakers from different continents talking about global and local concerns. As we begin a new year, we look at what lies ahead. And first and foremost, we've decided to partner with a newly formed University Sustainability Office at DLSU, which will provide logistical support when we look at new issues, when we consider new formats, including hybrid lectures with a live audience inside the university. So these are what are in store for us in the coming year. Thank you and good day. Good day.
Thank you so much. So again, good morning, everyone. And today, for the month of March, International Women's Month, we have a panel of women discussants. We have invited three distinguished women who are leading the charge in sustainability. We have Dr. Charlle Sy, who is a full professor at De La Salle University, who is revolutionizing decision-making in engineering systems. And her research interests are on robust optimization called target-oriented robust optimization. We'll get to know more about her later in the panel discussion. Our next speaker is Dr. Jonna Baquillas, who is an early career researcher with a very diversified professional portfolio. She is an associate professor of the Department of Marketing and Advertising, also at De La Salle University. Our third speaker is Dr. Sheree Pagsuyoin, who is a Fulbright Global Scholar and a tenured Associate Professor and Associate Chair for Doctoral Studies in Civil and Environmental Engineering at UMass Lowell. So we'll get to know more about their work and their experience as women researchers in the field of sustainability in our panel discussion. I'd also like to call our Vice President for Research and Innovation, Dr. Tan, who will be moderating the session.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our audience from different parts of the world. This is one of the editions of the Sustainability Lecture Series where we experiment with a different format. And in celebration of National Women's Day in the Philippines, as well as belated celebration of International Day for Women in Science. We have a powerhouse panel of 3 women from different universities and different disciplines to talk about their sustainability efforts. I will first note that we've actually had an exchange. One of our panel members, Dr. Charlle Sy, is a professor at Salle University who is currently stationed in Cornell University as a visiting professor on extended, I believe, 1-year stay. And to balance the flows, of course, Dr. Sheree Pagsuyoin is from the University of Massachusetts Lowell and is currently also on extended visit in Salle University in the Philippines as a visiting professor. Dr. Baquillas is, of course, provides us with perspectives from the real world of business based on her experience at the Ramon V. Del Rosario College of Business of the LSU. So I'll begin with this. I'll ask each of our panel members to please introduce yourself and your research interests, in particular, the sustainability angle. And perhaps we can do this in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Jonna.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm Jonna Baquillas. As Dr. Tan mentioned, I'm from the College of Business. I'm currently focused on doing research on sustainable consumption and production, circular economy, just energy transition, and sustainable tourism.
Right, thank you. Then, because this is alphabetical, Dr. Sheree, please.
Good morning, everyone, or good evening and good afternoon. So I work in the area of water and health. So currently I'm doing a lot more work on developing technologies for tracking remotely and passively tracking pollutants in the environment.
Yes, and Dr. Charlle, please.
Hello, everyone. So good morning over there, and it's good evening here. But anyway, my research is on optimization with uncertainty, and I also work in system dynamics on various sustainable problems like reverse logistics, energy transition, and so on. Yeah.
All right, thanks very much for the introduction. I'll start our conversation with a very generic question that I'm sure many of the people in our audience would be interested to know. How did you end up in research-oriented careers? Was this something that you planned out at age 12, or so please share your stories with us. And again, Jonna, please, I can ask you to get the ball rolling for us.
All right. So, I mean, I didn't really plan on being in the academe. I started in the industry. I came from the retail industry, and when I was there, consumer behavior really got to me. I mean, it was very interesting for me. And then eventually I tried teaching. I quite enjoyed it because I grew tired of the corporate world. It was sort of, I grew tired making money for the company. So I sort of wanted to look for something that's more fulfilling. And so I ended up teaching in the academe. And then somewhere along the way, I went to the development sector as well. And then went back to the academe. So it's sort of perhaps a mixture of different experiences that made me stay right now. I feel like this is home for me, doing research, and I'm enjoying it as much as I guess everyone in the room right now.
Well, that's great to know. We'll get back to your story in a while, but let's ask Sheree. Sheree, is this something that you drifted into or planned?
No, I wasn't really planning on anything actually before. I come from a family of engineers, and I have 2 brothers, and so there's the first girl engineer in the family. So I wanted to think about at the time what course was harder than my brothers. It's a competition with my siblings, and so that's kind of started where I went into, because I went into chemical engineering, and then when I was doing my master's, there was a project with World Bank that was on water actually, and sustainable water supply. And so that started my career track on focusing more on water treatment. And then I did my PhD, and then now I'm in academia. So it wasn't really a planned thing, like Jonna's as well.
Charlie?
Okay, well, in my case, I knew early on I didn't want to go the 8 to 5. I didn't want to have an 8 to 5 job. So I avoided the industry. And that's the reason why I considered applying for a PhD. I didn't plan to stay in the academe, but here we are. After PhD, I just found myself loving the environment, and 12 years down, I'm still loving what I do here in the academe. Yeah.
All right, that's great. It's um, just to any young person who might not have such solid plans ahead, take note. Life takes us to surprising places. But I do have a question because at some point you interfaced with the non-academic world, industry, or the world back in the case of She. Do you find your position now in academia, in the so-called ivory tower, how do you find that meshing with your intent to make the planet better, to make the world a better place? Does being in the ivory tower isolate you from the real world? What are your thoughts on this? And again, Jonna, please.
All right. I think because of my experiences from different sectors, it keeps me grounded and it keeps my eye open to also what's actually needed on the ground. For example, at some point, I think I've asked you about this. At some point, I was wondering, research, does it remain within the confines of the academia? I mean, it's just there, it's published. Who uses it actually? And does the real world actually use it, right? I've had those questions, especially when I was in the development sector. But I guess because of my experiences now, I'm able to put things together, coming from the industry, coming from the development sector, and then also working on my research. I'm able to find ways on how to actually maximize the research so that it also gets used in the real world and gets used by communities, for example.
She.
So my research right now actually touches base with outside of academia. So we're doing some development of technology. So with that, you interface with industry and you interface. Like me, I work with EPA, US EPA, and I work with USGS, for instance. And so in that context, you kind of are, I wouldn't say forced, but it kind of is a natural transition where our research goes outside of the confines of academia, because you need to find a place for the application of your work, especially with engineering. Engineering is a very applied science, math, science, and everything else. So otherwise, you're just really doing research that nobody maybe reads. So the kind of work that I do touches on that one. And I think also when I went into the intersection of health and engineering, so that kind of work that I do over there is very applied. And then I think the last one that I wanted to say, I did go back to school after after a few years outside teaching and doing research. I did go back to school, which I finished just last semester. It's in business analytics. And so in that context, I kind of are a bit more, aware that for your technology and engineering that you worked on so hard to build and develop, you kind of have to have a market for that that's more applied. And so in that sense, yes, it's for me, it's a little bit different. And I think for some time, if you've spent so much time, I'm a little bit older than maybe some of my panelists. So if you spend so much time in academia doing research, it kind of is a very isolating experience and you want to venture out. So for me, this is the period in my life where trying to venture out so I don't get bored with just going to the four corners of my office and do something else outside of it. And so that's where I am. So for me, it's very applied.
Well, in my opinion, actually, it's good to see that the industry is becoming more accepting of the need to actually ask or consult with researchers with what they're doing. So I think it's very different, like what was before and what's now. It's very different. Like I'm not sure if the term is maturing. So I see what we do as getting getting appreciated more by the industry. And just to share, my research here in Cornell is actually on the decarbonization by 2050. It's working towards the bill signed by President Biden. So in a sense, that's very applied. We're trying to find ways to to quantify what would be the appropriate incentives so that people will purchase more vehicles that would use less diesel or those fossil fuels, if you say. So yeah, I think it could be a misconception that we're isolated in the academe or in as researchers. I think
Yeah, I think RT,
I
are you
think I
there?
would.
Okay, there you go.
I'm back. I just paused for a bit to recharge, but that's interesting to note because we in academia, of course, have to often contend with skepticism from people in the real world because potentially our distance from the ground problems might actually make people more skeptical of our inputs. But it seems that with these pressing problems, and perhaps because of the recent pandemic, perhaps there's more appreciation of what specialists can contribute to solving sustainability. I do have one question, which just off the top of my head. Charlie and She, you both practically exchanged places, traveling halfway around the world. Jonna, I know that you've been on an academic tour recently in Africa at a major international convention. What are your thoughts on internationalization? How does that affect your outlook as a researcher? And is it something that you think is overrated, or could you share? And maybe now we can break with tradition and just feel free to jump in at any sequence that you prefer.
Well, I can go ahead. Well, at this when I went here, obviously I felt envious about the efficiency of everything. But on another note, I think that we're on par. It's just that they have projects really that you would say they have a lot of projects that are running, and there is an immediate audience for it, whereas in our case we usually have to really sell these ideas to the government or to the industry. For them it's the opposite. They're the ones being like sought after or you know pursued by the industry. So I guess that's one difference. We have a lot of things to catch up on, but I would say that we're on the right direction.
For me,
That's great. That's promising. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so yeah, for me it's a little bit different. Like, so I've been leading outside of country for almost 20 years now. And so so I do research in a kind of very fast-paced domain. But when I started, it was fascinating for me to have access to all this technology that we didn't really have in the Philippines, because I came from, I mean, I did my undergrad in the Philippines. So when I moved to the US, it's so easy to access a lot of the technology in the lab, for example. So those, I think, me coming back to the Philippines right now, I see some equipment that I would normally not see along a few years back. And I see that, for example, it's chromatography equipment, which are more expensive than one building sometimes, just a single equipment. And I see that in the Philippines now. It's still, there are some areas for improvement. I think, I don't know how many LCMSs, for example, are available in the Philippines, but here, for instance, or in the US, for instance, in my building alone, you have a few. So to be able to have this big difference between the time that I was there in the Philippines, actually, it's kind of confusing because I'm currently physically in the Philippines. So yeah, so when I was in the Philippines as a Philippine researcher, I think there's a big transition between then and now. So I feel like you have access to certain technology already. Funding is still a little bit of an issue, right? So as Charlie has said, when you're in the Philippines, you really have to sell your work. And I think I'm astounded by what you can do with a lot less resources, for instance. It's very fascinating for me. Like I would only have, for example, 6 people in the lab on a $1 million grant, but you will have so many people working in your lab and you're able to facilitate and move things around. So I think that's a talent, that's a skill that's very unique to the Philippines that you don't see outside. The ability to produce more out of a little things and the ability to mobilize, even if you have fewer resources. In terms though of like internalization, I see that a lot of Philippine researchers, not just those who are going on exchange like Charlie is, there's a lot of collaboration. So there's a lot of foreigners now that go to university, like with DLSU alone. I've only been there like less than 2 months, but I've seen foreigners come in and collaborate with you. And it's not a collaboration that's one-off. It's a collaboration that apparently has been going on for a while. And so I think there is a lot of growth now, and there's a lot of potential to do even more.
Jonna,
Right.
tell us about your experience.
I think in our discipline in the College of Business or in business discipline in general, it's kind of different because my my training really was more to look within, just within. It's more localized in terms of perspective, but actually I guess the reason why I'm more global in my outlook now is because of my exposure in interdisciplinary research with your team, with team from people from the College of Engineering. It has opened my eyes to the possibilities of, going outside of this little world, going outside of the Philippines and actually learning from other people. And that has also built my confidence to actually contact people that I can collaborate with, that also pushes me to pursue opportunities that would let me meet people, network with people outside of the Philippines. But what's also interesting is that we're currently working on research circular economy. We work on various topics within circular economy, but one of the things that we're looking at right now is the importance, the significance of indigenous practices and grassroots initiatives in promoting circular economy. So it's mostly understanding how all of these uh local activities can actually fuel circular economy transition. So it's internalization, but also more of looking at what can we do within our local capacity to actually help in these transitions. So it's very interesting that we're going global, we're looking for international collaborators, but we're also looking inside and looking at what we can contribute to a bigger output, bigger transition. That's it for me.
Yes, thanks for that. And again, of course, as far as sustainability goes, we all live in the same planet, and some of the pollutants that the issues that we deal with actually cross boundaries quite easily. I'm going to pause here and address our audience and ask if anybody would like to raise his or her hand and ask a question, or perhaps type something into the chat box. We shall assume that the question is intended for all 3 panel members unless you specify otherwise. So we have something which came up just now, which is from our co-host, Dr. Ria. Let me just, the message disappeared, but try to find that. All right. So from Dr. Ria, women have historically been underrepresented in STEM fields, including environmental sciences and sustainability. What challenges have you faced as women in these areas, and how can we encourage and support more women to pursue careers in sustainability?
I can go ahead if the other 2 panelists.
Yes,
okay.
please. Go ahead,
So
please.
so yeah, it's interesting, right? So usually my experience is that I sit in a room and I preside meetings and I'm the only woman in there. So, and it's in engineering, right? So you teach in a classroom, for instance, you probably have only 3 women students. I teach fluid mechanics, for instance. It's mostly men and guys that are there. But also in projects, like I lead projects, and everyone on my team is a guy, and I've been very lucky to have every time. Oh, not every time, most of the time, to have very collegial men in the group, and so in the sense that for me, I think that is just like this is a very blatant kind of like saying that there are not as many women in STEM. That's kind of at least my experience. And so what challenges have I faced to get there? I think with at least for me, when I compete, for instance, for grants, it's always NSF, and NSF is really blind to what your gender is and what your nationality is and what your race is. So the experiences that I've had getting involved in that kind of in those projects, competing for those grants, have kind of encouraged me to do more research as a member of the women community, for instance. And so challenges that I face, it's the same for many of you, to kind of get your foot on the ground, get your voice heard as a minority in the research area that I'm working in. Where we are going now, I'm seeing a lot more effort within the university and outside of the university and within our science foundation as well, to encourage participation of not just women, but minority groups or underrepresented groups to get involved in STEM. And so for me, as one of the older researchers now, I feel like the mentorship that I've received from the generation ahead of me in terms of, getting your foot on the ground, getting your research started as a person that's not normally in this field of research, I'd like to do that to the younger ones as well. So I'd like to participate more in these efforts where we're trying to encourage people to do more research, like women in research. I think, for instance, in my school, we have some women groups that try to meet like once a month. And the purpose really is not to meet the older ones to meet, but to actually seek out the younger professors to kind of give them an avenue to air out what are the difficulties you're having getting your research started, what are support needs that you have. So I'm in that period in my life now where I'm trying to do more mentorship, very specifically to sustainability though. So because I work in the area of water, and so you kind of look at what are the issues that are about sustainability. So for us, we develop technologies, and when you develop a technology for water, you look at where you could apply it, and you actually start seeing that in certain areas, they don't, even in the US, you would think that we have all this technology in water access, but there are certain areas where they are disproportionately not provided, or they don't have access to say a safe water source. And so it's what they call it. So those are groups that are underrepresented as well. And so to be able to bring your research, your technology into those areas is one of the things that we kind of try to get more involved in. I try to get more involved in. So sorry, I was kind of like going in different directions. But yeah, I think my point is that for me, the difficulty was at how to start my research. And now I would like to be able to mentor as well the younger ones who are in the same starting point in their career.
Maybe I can share, like, I'm not sure if I was just lucky, but I've never experienced like anything, any challenge with regards to like gender, like I women in STEM. It never was a big issue for me. Actually, I felt that it's the reverse. Like I made it work towards like I benefited from all the programs of having women in STEM. I like last year I applied for the US ASEAN Prize for Women, and again all of these recognitions for women I worked towards my favor, I guess. And again, I'm not sure if it was just luck, but all of my mentors before, from undergrad to graduate studies, everyone helped me to reach where I am right now. So yeah, I think it's the environment 10 or 12 years ago is very different from now because of the programs that have been in place. So it for someone who wants to go into STEM, it won't be as daunting because there are a lot of women in STEM right now.
I think I'm with Charlie on this one, although I come from social science. But in the field of sustainability, I feel like there are actually a lot of opportunities for women, and especially women, because now we're aiming for diversity and inclusion. And so there are a lot of opportunities that are opening for women. Um, but I also feel that the enabling environment that I am part of, like it being a safe space and it being um sort of validating your skills, your talent, and then actually pushing you to go beyond your limits. I think that's a gift also that any person, regardless of gender, can have in this field. So but I feel like I also have, I mean, I'm very comfortable working with men or being with, that doesn't sound right, but my sport is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And um normally on the mat, I'm also just the only woman, training and sparring with men. So I kind of perhaps developed that comfort working with men. And I guess that also helps in just going out there and believing in yourself, knowing your capabilities, and making sure that whenever an opportunity is open, just go for it. I've had experiences before also wherein I felt like, I doubted myself, or I doubted my skills, I doubted what I can give. But I just went for it. For me, if there's a call for grants or call for proposals, that's interesting enough for me, just go ahead and go for it. I mean, you won't lose anything if you don't get the grant, but you lose that feeling of, okay, I tried it, at least I tried it. But then if I don't get it, it's okay, at least I learned from it. So I guess in general, I'm at that stage now wherein I just go for anything that interests me and try to get whatever opportunity is open. If that doesn't work out, move on to the next one, and find a better place or find something that's more interesting for you. So I guess that's how I'm seeing it right now.
Thank you for those inputs, Ian. Actually, at least Dr. Ria brought up the gender topic. I wonder if, just briefly, if we can stay on this topic for a while. Would you say that, should we approach it? I'm trying to be very careful with my words here. I know some women whose approach is particularly to work as if it's a non-issue, because trying to, say, do the extra mile actually perpetuates any gender biases which exist. I know some women who actually think the opposite, that they should take the extra step to compensate, to push that bias, to push back against the bias.
RT is frozen. Ria, do you have any other questions? I want to bring in Ria to be included in the panel. What about any questions from? Okay, I think. Oh, Raymond dropped off. Ria, can I put you on spotlight? Okay. There. RT is here.
Sorry about that. I got to repeat myself, should we just proceed? Do you think you should proceed as if gender biases are not an issue in scholarly work, or do you see yourself as sort of an example or a campaigner for improved women's representation in your discipline?
I don't think you have to choose, right? I mean, for me, it's a non-issue, but being here also encourages younger women to pursue a career in STEM. So I don't think it's an exclusive thing. You can treat it as a non-issue and still be like a still be an example to others. And if seeing that you're actually successful in this field is one way to encourage others to also pursue it. That's my yeah, that's my opinion on it.
For me, I would agree in the sense that it's not the way I do my work. It's never been like a out there that, hey, you're a woman engineer. I mean,
Your mic is
can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, we can hear
please,
you. We
please.
can hear
Actually-
you.
now we can hear you, but
Okay, so for me, it's also a non-issue in the sense that my experience, I've never been, I've never had that feeling that you're a woman engineer and you're discouraged. I do notice that there are fewer women whenever you go, but statistics do show that there are fewer women, and so just to give them an opportunity to access resources that I've had access to become like a successful woman researcher. That's something kind of that I want to encourage more. So the other one is how to say the younger. I agree with Charlie that the younger ones, there are women who are really good at coding, for example, that don't get to have the training or the the exposure early on in their life to develop those skills. And so to kind of give that more opportunity to those younger ones, and even actually not just the younger ones, to give them the opportunity to be able to access those resources. And as I said, it's for me, it's a non-issue, but I've also met a lot of other researchers, women researchers, that have a very different experience than me. And so I would like to kind of, how to say, I like to kind of bring that to the forefront as well, that not everybody's experience is the same as mine, where I have the privilege to not experience any kind of discrimination, for instance, as a woman scientist. But that's not the same for many that I know of. And so for them, it's the other side of the fence, that they actually really have to fight tooth and nail to get what other other people of a different gender, of a different race, to get ahead in their career. So how to say, for me, my personal experience is not that bad at all, but I think and as a whole in general, it has to be fought. It has to be something that we give more opportunity, not more opportunities to one side, but to give them more to equalize the field, level out the field, for instance, to give them more access to things that typically only a few have access to.
Yeah, I think it's the same for me. As I mentioned earlier, I've had a very good experience with people I worked with, but I do also know that glass ceiling still exists in other cultures, in other disciplines, in other industries as well. So that's not to be dismissed. But for me, I think the promotion of of a safe space for women where they can be nurtured and where they can as she mentioned, be given access to resources. For example, young scientists or young researchers can be nurtured into developing their confidence and their skills in whatever field they choose. I think that's still an important an important aspect that needs to be looked at, especially in cultures wherein women are still seen as a second class citizen, or women are still confined to doing housework, or uh being seen as you just belong in the kitchen or something like that. I think that's also very empowering for women if they are given opportunities and opening opportunities for them, really, that would make them that would capitalize on their skills and capabilities.
Frozen
I
naman si
think,
Arch.
yes, I will just step in for him. There's a
Yes, yes.
question from the chat box. Any inspiring story that helped deepen your interest and commitment to pursue your research or career in sustainability? Any particular story? Maybe even if it's not inspiring.
Maybe I can share how I got here in Cornell. Yun
Okay.
medyo yeah, well, I just actually did the Google search because I was looking for a fellowship. That I wanted to try doing a fellowship because I planned to do it, but the pandemic, but COVID happened. So after COVID, I tried to do a Google search, and then I saw the landing page of the systems engineering page of Cornell, and then I sent in an essay, and after a year, they got back to me. So within that year, I thought within the year that I was waiting, I thought that they rejected just because I didn't hear anything. But after a year, they finally set up an interview. So I went through 3 rounds of interview, and now I'm here teaching and doing research. So I guess that's one way to just share that you really have to try. Don't be afraid of failing, because the worst that could happen is your pride getting hurt. You'll forget it when you achieve something better. No one remembers failures. So in the end, you tend to celebrate the victories, right? So yeah, I've had a lot of rejections, but the 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 acceptance of what happens, like here, I'm here right now. I think that's worth the trouble of getting rejected.
Thank you, Dr. Charlie. I agree with you. Actually, one of my motto is just uh, apply and apply so that you have more chances of winning.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an inspiring story. Thank you, Dr. Charlie. How about Dr. Jonan or Dr. Shi? Okay.
Jonna, you can start.
Uh,
Please.
it's okay. Go ahead.
How to say? So I work in the field of wastewater-based epidemiology, and you probably have heard of it. It's all about using your wastewater data to kind of look at the health of your community, and it got so popular everywhere during the pandemic. Well, we started that research actually maybe like 3-4 years before pandemic, and at the time it was really difficult to get this research off the ground because we were doing wastewater epidemiology on drug use. And so when wastewater utilities and anybody else actually would hear of what we want to do, they're almost always cautious, I would say, because you're like, what are you going to look for? We're looking for drugs in the water. Are you profiling us? So there's a lot of fear with that concept. And so it was difficult to get funding. It was difficult to get cooperation from people. And we've been doing that for like, 3-4 years. So a very difficult research to do. But then pandemic happened, and all of a sudden, everyone actually was calling us to, hey, can you analyze our water? It's a very different shift in like perspective. And so in that sense, now we're getting in the news, we're giving interviews about what you can do with your wastewater data. We get more funding now. Now we're developing new biosensors for pathogens. And so that was an offshoot of an investment in work and research that was many years in the making. And so I felt like at some point I wanted to give up on this research. And I'm like, why am I making my life so hard? I could have done another research on this. I have to submit to drug enforcement agency, for example, for background check to get clearance to get drugs in my lab. So I was like, if I gave up at the time, I would have lost the opportunity to actually even be a Fulbright scholar at TLSU, because my Fulbright research is on wastewater-based epidemiology application in different settings. And so that's kind of the research that I'm doing. So when I look back now, if I gave up 7 years ago to actually do this and not persisted, I would not be here right now. I would not have been giving all these interviews for MSN, for some stuff. So I think it's one thing for those who are, looking at research, and if you're like nobody's listening to you and nobody's interested, you want to balance it out, that you can see a future in it, that you can see a value in it for people. It may be that the funding agencies are not still listening to you, but at some point when you see that there's really value in it, to kind of just persevere and keep doing something that you actually love. So yeah, I guess.
For me, I think it's more of um the serendipity of being here. In my when I was a doctoral student, I was talking to our former dean, who became a friend. And one of the things that he told me, you have to carve out a path for you. If you want to focus on sustainability, then at some point, when people talk about sustainability, people have to remember you. You have to have that sort of like the brand recall, that when people are saying, okay, we're talking about sustainability, sustainable consumption, we have to go to this person. So you have to be that person. And that kind of stuck with me. This was early in my doctoral studies, perhaps 2017, 2018. That kind of stuck with me. And because sustainability is something that is really interesting for me, even when I was still in the corporate, I was still in the industry. And consumer behavior also is something that's very interesting to me. I just kind of put these uh things together. Um, and then after that, it's it's sort of everything just uh everything just fell into place, I guess. There were moments wherein it felt like it's serendipitous. Someone told me about, a short course in Japan, and then, oh, you want to apply for this, I can give a recommendation for this, and then eventually it got accepted. After that, it opened a lot of opportunities, going to another conference and collaborating with different people, submitting proposals, um working together with with people from different countries. It sort of just magnified, I guess, because I was open to the possibilities and I was open to the opportunities. And so I guess the takeaway here is that just go for it. Just, whenever there's an opportunity, just go for it. There's no harm in trying.
Hello, I'm back. I think
Yes,
we
yes.
have one question in the chat box, which is related.
He's
Not
gone
again.
again. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shi and Dr. Jonah. My takeaway is that just
To
do the
what
work.
three of you just
Oh,
said. So maybe you can address
He's back.
this specifically.
I don't know if I can answer this one in the chat box, but maybe my thoughts. So the chat box is about, where do you start when you're doing research and you think that your research is something so big that needs a lot more funding. If you are a new researcher, you really need to establish yourself, right? Unless your research is such a niche research that people will seek you out. But if it's a research where probably there are other people doing it, even you're new in that area, you want to, as Jonna mentioned, you want to establish yourself. So start with something small. If it's a very big project that you're envisioning, that might be your long-term goal. So you start with something, a component of that, towards that goal that you can achieve in 1 or 2 years, and that's your short-term goal. So get a small component of that grand plan that you have and start from there. And once you establish that you can do this research, people will start to hear of you, and then you can grow your project, you grow your research, and so you can go big. So always start, if you're a new researcher, always start with something that you can do in 1 to 2 years. That's what
I have a different advice. Actually, if you're new, you don't have to do it alone. There are always people that you can collaborate with, and then they'll have an easier time getting that funding that you need. So you collaborate, you work with other people, and eventually, in the end, in a few years, you'll be the principal investigator. So you're now going to switch sides, and you'll be the one to like mentor other young researchers. That worked for me. I was mentored by Dr. Tan, Dr. Aviso. So now I'm also like mentoring other researchers.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think interdisciplinarity is really an important movement nowadays. And so as Charlie mentioned, getting collaborators, getting people who are already in the field, whom you can also learn from, aside from them having the name already and being known in the field, can also help you get that funding later on for bigger projects.
All right, let me see if I'm really back now. We have just enough time for a parting shot from each of you. So I'll invite you to each give your words of wisdom or inspiration to our audience as a parting shot.
I'll start. Okay, so I am a Fulbright scholar currently until mid-May, and I know many in the panel or in attendance are probably in DLSU. So I'm around if you, and my email I believe is somewhere in the the advertisement for this. And so I'm around if you have questions at all about research or anything else, or questions about how do I get to the US if you wanted to do like an exchange. I mean, Charlie is already there and doing her exchange, but I could have different perspective. As I mentioned, I'm the associate chair for the graduate program of my university, and I work with different what they call US agencies as well. So if you wanted to kind of get involved in that kind of field, in that kind of research area, and you have questions, I'm around. You can, meet me in person. It's always better to meet in person now. I know Zoom is one thing, but you can't capture the interactions that you could get off of an in-person meeting. So I'm at the TLSU. So if you have questions, send me out. If you can't meet me in person, send me an email as well. So I'd be happy to help you out. I think that's for me.
Well, for me, do not, I guess, just don't put limits on what you can and cannot do. I mean, be open to all of the experiences that would be presented, all of the experiences, opportunities that will be presented to you. Again, these are all chances to learn and improve yourself, and eventually you'll find where you're supposed to be. Yeah.
For me, it's be open to opportunities, and also open your eyes beyond, beyond the Philippines. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities, especially for my discipline. I guess it's not very common for us to actually seek out experiences and opportunities outside. So be open to opportunities, know your capabilities, but also know how you can push beyond your limits, because I've done that. I thought I'm only up to this, but then, people who believed in me and validated me, for example, have pushed me beyond. And so I was able to do things that I never imagined I would be able to do. And perhaps find your tribe, find people who would really, help you reach your potentials. Choose your networks, choose meaningful networks, not just a regular network, or just don't just say, okay, let's collaborate. I mean, find people whom you can meaningfully collaborate with, and that can, you go extra mile with these people. Really find your tribe. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's about all the time we have for this panel discussion. Let's give our panel and our emergency host, Dr. Ria, as well, a round of applause, please. Again, just when a man fails at the job, a woman comes in to save the day. Thank you, Ria.
Thank you very much, everyone, to our panel and moderator. Before we end, we would like to invite everyone to fill out this feedback form. Send us your feedback so that we can know how to improve how we conduct these lectures. All right. So as for the invitation for next month's lecture, it will just be sent via email. So again, thank you very much, Prof. RT and Dr. Charlie, Dr. She, Dr.
Thank you.
Jonna. It's a very
Thank
productive
you.
discussion. Thank you so much. See you
Thank
around.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you to our
Thank you,
audience. See you
everyone.
next month,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll be ending the meeting now.